My name is Victoria Hayes, and until 26 hours ago, I was the Global Operations Director at Titan Manufacturing Corporation, overseeing three massive production facilities across North America, generating $5.2 billion in annual revenue. For 11 years, I built and maintained the operational backbone that kept Titan's automotive supply chain running flawlessly, managing everything from just-in-time delivery schedules to critical vendor relationships most executives didn't even know existed. What I never expected was for CEO Daniel Blackwood to decide my expertise was expendable at 10:05 a.m. on a Tuesday. Communicated through a phone call lasting exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Apparently, when you're the only person capable of coordinating three plants, 14 major suppliers, and 42 automotive manufacturers, you become too crucial to retain and too risky to fire properly. That misjudgment was about to cost Titan Manufacturing more money than Daniel Blackwood had made in his entire career and teach the automotive industry a costly lesson about the difference between titles and operational reality. The call that ended my career came while I was in my home office reviewing production schedules for a critical Honda shipment that needed to leave by 6 a.m. Which wasn't unusual because automotive manufacturing operates on razor-thin margins and unforgiving deadlines, meaning someone must monitor overnight shifts when issues arise. Someone who, for 11 years, had been me. Victoria, this is Daniel. I need to inform you of an immediate organizational restructuring that affects your position, he said, his voice carrying the exact tone executives adopt when delivering bad news from prepared scripts, something I'd heard during the quarterly layoffs that had become routine under his leadership. What kind of restructuring? I asked, already calculating possibilities while watching real-time production data scroll across my monitors. Your position as Global Operations Director is being eliminated effective immediately. We're consolidating operational oversight under our new VP of Strategic Manufacturing, who brings a more streamlined approach to production management. Streamlined approach. Corporate speak for. We hired someone cheaper who doesn't actually understand how anything works. Daniel, I'm managing 3 active production crises and a time-sensitive delivery schedule. Can this wait until normal business hours? I'm afraid not. The decision has been finalized and must be implemented immediately for administrative efficiency, he said. Administrative efficiency at 10:05 a.m., while production lines couldn't afford to stop. Hold on a second. My CEO just fired me in the middle of active production crises because it was administratively efficient. If you've ever witnessed this level of corporate timing, hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to become a masterclass in spectacularly bad decision-making. Daniel, who's taking over operational oversight for the current shift? There are critical decisions that need to be made in the next 4 hours. Marcus Caney, our new VP of Strategic Manufacturing, would assume responsibility for all operational functions. He had extensive experience with manufacturing optimization. Marcus Caney, I'd never heard the name, which meant he had been hired without input from the person who actually understood Titan's operations. Has Marcus been briefed on tonight's delivery schedules and production priorities? He'll receive comprehensive transition documentation and will coordinate with plant managers as needed. Transition documentation for operations that required split-second decisions based on 11 years of institutional knowledge about supplier quirks, equipment limitations, and client-specific requirements. Daniel, Titan's operations aren't something you can hand off with documentation. There are vendor relationships, equipment protocols, timing dependencies. Victoria, we appreciate your dedication, but we have confidence in our transition planning. Marcus brings a fresh perspective to operational challenges that may have become overly complex under previous management. Previous management, that would be me, the person who had built Titan's operational efficiency from 73% to 97% over 11 years, saving the company roughly $340 million in waste and delays. When does this transition take effect? Immediately. We need you to cease all operational activities and transfer access credentials to Marcus by 2 a.m. Cease operational activities. While three plants worth $5.2 billion were running overnight shifts with multiple active problems demanding ongoing coordination, and halting operational oversight in the middle of production could trigger equipment failures, delivery, delays, and safety issues. Marcus is fully prepared to handle any operational challenges. We wouldn't make this change if we weren't confident in the transition. I stared at my monitors showing real-time data from Detroit, Atlanta, and Phoenix plants, equipment alerts, supplier delays, quality control flags, timing adjustments, dozens of decisions needing someone who understood how all the pieces fit together. I understand, I said finally. Do you need me to brief Marcus on current operational status? That won't be necessary. He prefers to assess situations independently rather than inherit previous management assumptions. Previous management assumptions like knowing which suppliers required special handling, which equipment needed close monitoring, and which clients had zero tolerance for delivery delays. I'll transfer my access credentials within the hour, I said. Excellent. HR will contact you tomorrow about transition documentation and final administrative details. The line went dead at 1:08 a.m., 3 minutes and 47 seconds to erase 11 years of operational expertise in the middle of managing an active production crisis. I leaned back in my chair, staring at screens full of data that would soon belong to someone else. Marcus Caney, whoever he was about to learn that managing Titan's operations required more than strategic manufacturing experience and a fresh perspective. But that was Daniel Blackwood's decision, not mine. He had decided operational expertise was expensive and replaceable. Now he was about to discover just how costly that assumption could be. You know what's fascinating about midnight terminations? They usually happen when leadership wants to avoid the questions competent employees ask during normal business hours. If you're curious what questions I might have asked, stick around, because Marcus Caney was about to get a very expensive education. The transition process was surreal. At 1:47 a.m., I began systematically transferring access credentials for systems I'd built, optimized, and monitored for over a decade. Production dashboards, supplier communication networks, equipment diagnostic systems, quality control protocols, layers of operational infrastructure that had taken years to develop and required constant attention to maintain. Each system transfer felt like disconnecting life support from a patient who still needed intensive care. At 2:23 a.m., my phone rang. An unknown number appeared on my phone, but I recognized the Titan exchange. Oh, Miss Hayes, this is Marcus Kane. I understand you've been managing overnight operations. I wanted to introduce myself and get a quick briefing on current status. Marcus Kane sounded younger than I'd expected, with the confident tone of someone who'd probably managed manufacturing before, but had never faced Titan's unique complexities. Hello, Marcus. I've transferred all access credentials as requested. You should have full operational oversight now. Great. Can you give me a quick overview of what's happening tonight? Any immediate concerns I should know about? I glanced at the monitors I was no longer authorized to access. You'll need to check the production dashboards for current status. I'm no longer involved in operational decisions. Right, of course. But just to get oriented, are there any critical issues I should prioritize? The question confirmed what I suspected. Marcus had been handed responsibility for operations with zero preparation for the specific challenges he was inheriting. Marcus, I'd recommend reviewing the current production schedules, checking supplier delivery status, and monitoring equipment alerts. The Detroit plant is having timing issues with the Honda delivery. Atlanta has a quality control flag on the Ford components, and Phoenix is dealing with a supplier delay affecting tomorrow's GM shipment. Okay. Detroit, Atlanta, Phoenix, Honda, Ford, GM. Got it? Anything else I should watch for? Anything else? 11 years of operational knowledge condensed into a vague question. You'll want to monitor the overnight shift supervisors. They handle routine decisions, but escalation protocols require operational oversight for non-standard situations. Perfect. And if I have questions, can I reach you tonight? I paused, recalling Daniel Blackwood's 1:05 a.m. call and his confidence that Marcus could manage operations independently. Marcus, I'm no longer employed by Titan as of 2 hours ago. You'll need to coordinate with plant managers and shift supervisors for operational support. The silence on the other end lasted long enough for me to wonder if the call had dropped. You're no longer employed as of tonight? As of 10:05 a.m., yes. But who's been managing operations? I thought I was taking over from you tomorrow. You took over at 2 a.m., when I transferred access credentials. Another pause. Miss Hayes, I think there may have been some miscommunication. I wasn't expecting to start tonight. I haven't reviewed current operations or been briefed on ongoing issues. And there it was. Daniel Blackwood had fired the person managing active operations and handed responsibility to someone unprepared to take over in the middle of overnight production runs that couldn't afford disruption. Marcus, I'd recommend contacting Daniel Blackwood or HR to clarify your responsibilities and timeline. I'm no longer in a position to provide operational guidance. Right. Okay. Thank you for the information. After hanging up, I sat in my dark office, watching the city lights through the window, thinking about the production facilities now running without the oversight they had relied on for 11 years. 3 plants worth $5.2 billion managing complex operations with tight deadlines and zero margin for error, now under the supervision of someone who hadn't expected to start until tomorrow. Daniel Blackwood had wanted immediate administrative efficiency. He was about to get a very expensive lesson in the difference between administrative convenience and operational reality. My phone buzzed with notifications from plant supervisors seeking operational guidance, messages I was no longer authorized to answer for operations I was no longer responsible for. I turned off my phone and went to bed. Whatever happened next was Marcus Kane's responsibility. The first crisis hit at 4:17 a.m., which I knew because my personal phone began ringing with calls from plant supervisors who had my direct number for emergencies, but apparently couldn't reach Marcus. I didn't answer any of them. By 6:30 a.m., I had 14 missed calls and 23 text messages from various Titan employees, ranging from shift supervisors asking for guidance to plant managers requesting clarification on delivery priorities. Questions that should have gone to Marcus Kane, but apparently weren't being answered. At 7:45 a.m., Daniel Blackwood called my personal phone. Victoria, we have some operational issues that require your immediate assistance. Good morning, Daniel. I'm no longer employed by Titan as of 1:05 a.m. yesterday. You'll need to coordinate operational support through Marcus Kane. Marcus is having some difficulty getting oriented. Difficulty getting oriented? 6 hours after taking responsibility for $5.2 billion worth of production operations. Daniel, you terminated my employment for administrative efficiency reasons. I'm not available for transition assistance. This is temporary consultation work. We're prepared to pay emergency consulting rates. Emergency consulting rates for fixing problems created by firing me in the middle of active operations. I'm not available for consulting work, I said. I'm exploring other opportunities. Other opportunities? Yes. Operational expertise becomes highly sought after when it suddenly becomes available. What I didn't mention was that my phone had been ringing since 6 a.m. with calls from Titan's competitors, all of whom had heard through industry channels that I was no longer with the company. Automotive manufacturing is a small community, and news travels fast when someone with my track record becomes available. Victoria, we need to discuss this situation. Can you come in this morning? I don't think that would be appropriate. Marcus Kane is fully prepared to handle operational challenges. According to yesterday's conversation, the situation has become more complex than anticipated. More complex than anticipated. Translation: everything was falling apart without the person who actually understood how it worked. I'm sure Marcus will figure it out. He brings fresh perspective to operational challenges. Remember, Victoria, we're willing to discuss reinstatement with improved terms. Reinstatement after firing me at 10:05 a.m. for administrative efficiency. Daniel, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in returning to a position that can be eliminated on 3 minutes' notice for administrative convenience. What would it take? I looked out my kitchen window at the morning traffic, thinking about the 11 years I'd spent building operational systems that Daniel Blackwood had just discovered he couldn't function without. It would take a time machine, Daniel. You can't eliminate institutional knowledge and then expect to rent it back when you realize you need it. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced since leaving corporate management: complete control over my professional future. They'd fired me to streamline operations, and now they were learning that some operations can't be streamlined without the expertise that makes them work. The education was expensive, but exactly what they'd paid for. Ever notice how streamlined operations usually just means operations without the people who understand them? If you're enjoying this lesson in cause and effect, drop a comment about your own experiences with management decisions that prioritized convenience over competence. The complete collapse of Titan Manufacturing's operations took exactly 18 hours and 43 minutes. I watched it unfold from my new favorite coffee shop in downtown Detroit, deliberately staying visible while 3 production facilities worth $5.2 billion learned what happens when operational expertise is eliminated for administrative efficiency. The first domino fell at 9:47 a.m. when the Detroit plant's main assembly line shut down due to what Marcus Caney later described as unexpected equipment coordination issues. In operational terms, this meant Marcus hadn't grasped the delicate timing sequence I developed for coordinating 3 different supplier deliveries with 2 assembly stations and 1 quality control checkpoint. When supplier A's delivery arrived 30 minutes early, Marcus approved immediate unloading without realizing supplier B's components needed to be staged first to maintain proper assembly flow. The result was a logistics bottleneck that backed up the entire production line and triggered automatic safety shutdowns when workers couldn't access the proper staging areas. What should have been a simple supplier coordination became a 4-hour shutdown, delaying the Honda delivery by 6 hours and costing approximately $340,000 in missed production targets. I learned about this not from panicked phone calls, but from LinkedIn messages from former colleagues expressing shock that communication breakdowns were happening so soon after my departure. The second domino fell at 2:15 p.m. when the Atlanta plant's quality control system flagged defective components that should have been caught during incoming inspection. The problem wasn't with the components themselves, but with Marcus's decision to skip the specialized testing protocol I had developed for this supplier. Hartwell Automotive had a history of temperature-sensitive packaging that required precise handling procedures. I had learned this over 3 years working with their logistics team and had created testing protocols that caught problems before they reached assembly. Marcus apparently deemed these protocols unnecessarily complex and instructed the Atlanta team to use standard testing procedures. The result was 47 defective components passing initial inspection, contaminating an entire production batch worth $1.2 million. Here's something business school doesn't teach you. Institutional knowledge isn't just documentation. It's understanding why the documentation exists. If you're enjoying this lesson unfolding in real time, hit that subscribe button, because we're about to see what happens when 3 plants lose coordination simultaneously. By 4:30 p.m., the Phoenix plant was experiencing what industry professionals call a cascade failure. Marcus had tried to compensate for the Detroit and Atlanta delays by accelerating Phoenix's production schedule, without realizing Phoenix's operations were specifically calibrated to support the other 2 facilities. Phoenix didn't just manufacture components. It produced specialized subassemblies required by both Detroit and Atlanta. When Marcus ordered Phoenix to prioritize their own deliveries over supporting the other plants, he unknowingly severed the coordination that kept all three facilities synchronized. The result was Phoenix producing components Detroit and Atlanta couldn't use. While Detroit and Atlanta waited for components Phoenix wasn't producing, by 6 p.m., all three plants were operating at less than 30% capacity, with production schedules misaligned with delivery commitments. I learned the full scope of the crisis from an unexpected source, my former assistant Jennifer Walsh, who called my personal phone at 6:47 p.m. Victoria, I probably shouldn't be calling you, but the situation here is completely insane. Marcus has been in emergency meetings all day, and no one knows how to fix what's happening. What exactly is happening? I asked. All three plants are basically shut down. Detroit can't finish the Honda order. Atlanta scrapped an entire production run, and Phoenix is making parts that nobody needs. The plant managers are asking for guidance, but Marcus keeps saying he needs time to assess the operational landscape. Assess the operational landscape. While $5.2 billion worth of production infrastructure sat idle because the person who actually understood the landscape had been eliminated for administrative efficiency. Has anyone contacted the clients about delivery delays? That's the worst part. Marcus says we should wait until tomorrow to see if the situation improves before notifying clients. But Victoria, we're talking about Honda, Ford, and GM. These aren't companies that tolerate surprise delays. No, they weren't. Automotive manufacturers operate on just-in-time delivery schedules with zero tolerance for supplier failures. Missing delivery commitments didn't just cost money, it damaged relationships that had taken years to build. Jennifer, I appreciate you calling, but I'm not in a position to provide guidance anymore. I know, it's just everyone's asking what you would do in this situation. What I would do was exactly what I'd been doing for 11 years: coordinate between plants, communicate with suppliers, manage client expectations, and maintain the operational rhythm that kept everything synchronized. But Daniel Blackwood had decided that coordination was too expensive to maintain. Jennifer, the situation will resolve itself one way or another. Marcus has the authority and responsibility to make operational decisions now. But what if he can't fix it? That was the question Daniel Blackwood should have asked before eliminating the person who actually knew how to prevent these problems in the first place. By Thursday morning, the industry reaction began appearing in trade publications. Titan Manufacturing Experiences, Multi-Plant Production Disruptions ran in Automotive Supply Chain Weekly, followed by Analyses in Manufacturing Today and Industrial Operations Quarterly. The articles were diplomatically worded, but the message was clear. Titan was experiencing operational failures that affected major automotive clients and raised serious questions about their ability to maintain delivery commitments. By Friday afternoon, the financial impact became visible. Titan stock had dropped 12% on investor concerns about production reliability, while competitors' shares rose on speculation that Titan's problems would drive business elsewhere. But the knockout punch came from the clients themselves. Honda issued a formal notice of contract review, citing reliability concerns in supplier operations. Ford implemented emergency contingency planning to source critical components from alternative suppliers, and GM's procurement department sent what amounted to a warning letter stressing the importance of delivery schedule adherence. In 4 days, Marcus Caney had managed to damage relationships that had taken 11 years to build. You know what's wild about operational expertise? When it's there, everything looks easy. When it's not there, everything looks impossible. If you've ever watched inexperience try to manage complex systems, drop a comment about how that worked out. The call I'd been expecting came Friday evening, not from Daniel Blackwood this time, but from Titan's board of directors, represented by Chairwoman Catherine Morrison. Miss Hayes, I'm calling to discuss a potential consulting engagement that would help Titan address some operational challenges we're experiencing. Consulting engagement. Corporate speak for Please fix the disaster we created by firing you. What kind of challenges are you experiencing? Multi-facility coordination issues affecting production efficiency and client delivery schedules. The board believed my expertise could help resolve these complications. 4 days of production failures that had cost millions in lost revenue and damaged relationships with major automotive manufacturers. Mrs. Morrison, what specifically is Titan looking for in this consulting arrangement? Immediate operational assessment and recommendations for stabilizing production across all 3 facilities. We're prepared to offer premium consulting rates for expedited service. Premium consulting rates for fixing problems that wouldn't exist if they hadn't eliminated the person who actually prevented them. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not available for consulting work. Not available, Miss Hayes? We're talking significant compensation for helping resolve a temporary situation. I'm not available because I've accepted a position elsewhere. Meridian Industrial Systems offered me a role as VP of Operations with responsibility for building their new automotive supply division. The silence on the other end told me everything. Meridian Industrial was Titan's largest competitor, and they had just hired away the person who understood Titan's operational vulnerabilities better than anyone. Miss Hayes, surely we can discuss terms competitive with any other offer. Mrs. Morrison, 4 days ago, Titan fired me at 10:05 a.m. for administrative efficiency. Today, you're offering premium rates to fix the problems that decision created. What's changed isn't my availability. It's your understanding of what operational expertise is actually worth. What would it take to bring me back? I looked out my apartment window at the Detroit skyline, thinking about the 11 years I'd spent building systems that Daniel Blackwood had destroyed in a single midnight phone call. It would take competent leadership that understands the difference between cutting costs and cutting capabilities. Meridian Industrial offered that Titan apparently didn't. The final chapter of Titan's operational collapse played out over the following month. Unable to restore coordination between their 3 plants, they were forced to bring in emergency consulting teams at costs exceeding my annual salary within 2 weeks. The consultants were competent but temporary. Every solution they implemented required ongoing maintenance and optimization that Titan no longer had the internal expertise to provide. Meanwhile, Meridian Industrial was building exactly the kind of operation I'd always envisioned: proper coordination between facilities, comprehensive supplier relationships, and leadership that understood operational excellence required ongoing investment in the people who created it. 6 months later, Meridian won the contract to supply Honda's new electric vehicle line, a $2.3 billion deal Titan had been favored to win before their operational reliability came into question. I received a final contact from Titan 9 months after my termination. Daniel Blackwood calling from what sounded like a much smaller office, requesting a meeting to discuss lessons learned and potential future collaboration. I declined politely. Some lessons are too expensive to teach twice. Sometimes the most expensive business education comes from learning the difference between having operations and understanding them. Daniel taught me that expertise can't be eliminated and then rented back when convenient. Meridian taught me that the right leadership recognizes operational knowledge as strategic advantage rather than administrative overhead. If you made it this far, you clearly understand that real operations management isn't about cutting costs. It's about creating value through coordination, expertise, and institutional knowledge. Drop a comment if you've ever watched leadership confuse efficiency with elimination, and hit subscribe if you believe expertise should be valued before it walks out the door. They fired me to streamline operations. Instead, they learned that some operations require the expertise to understand them, and some expertise can't be replaced with good intentions and fresh perspectives. The education cost them $5.2 billion in operational capability, but it was priceless for everyone who learned that cutting operational expertise doesn't optimize anything. It just ensures that someone else will profit from opportunities you can no longer manage. The final vindication came 2 years later when Titan Manufacturing was acquired by a Chinese conglomerate for 60% below peak valuation. Industry analysts specifically cited operational instability and the loss of institutional knowledge as key factors that weakened the company's market position. The acquisition announcement included a telling detail. The new owner's first priority was rebuilding operational expertise and supplier relationships compromised during recent organizational transitions. Meanwhile, Meridian Industrial Systems, under my leadership, had become the dominant automotive supplier in the Great Lakes region. Our three new facilities were generating $7.8 billion in annual revenue, and we'd won contracts from every major automaker Titan had lost. Within 18 months, business schools were teaching this case study. The midnight termination, how operational expertise became competitive advantage, became required reading in several MBA programs focusing on manufacturing management. Daniel Blackwood never recovered professionally. After Titan's acquisition, he spent 2 years in consulting before taking a significantly reduced role at a mid-tier manufacturing company. Industry colleagues later told me he became obsessed with operational documentation and knowledge retention, lessons learned too late. I kept one memento from my Titan years: the final quarterly report showing record operational efficiency numbers, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that expertise isn't overhead. It's the foundation that everything else depends on.